She could not run. That was the first thing the men in town noticed about her, and the last thing they let her forget. A girl who limps cannot flee, cannot fight, cannot be anything but caught. And in that country in that year, a person who could be caught was a person who could be used up and thrown away like a cracked bit of harness. Nobody expected her to last the winter. Nobody expected a broken-down cattleman with a bad shoulder and a ledger full of debts to be the one who stood between her and the whole hard world. Least of all him. This is the story of a limp, a lie, a ledger, and 4 words spoken so quietly that the wind nearly stole them. 4 words that cost more than either of them could afford and were worth every cent. Stay with me. It doesn't go where you think it goes. The first time I saw her, she was crawling. Not walking, not stumbling, crawling on her hands and one good knee, dragging the other leg behind her through the wet clay at the edge of the wash like a thing already half in the grave and too stubborn to finish the job. It was the gray hour before dawn, the hour I've never learned to sleep through, and I'd come down to the creek to see how high the water had run in the night. I keep a tally of such things. Rainfall, water levels, the number of calves dropped, the number I lose. Numbers hold still when nothing else will. A man can lean on a number. I did not lean on anything that morning. I stood at the top of the bank with my coffee going cold in the tin cup, and I watched a woman crawl. She hadn't seen me yet. Her black hair had come loose and hung in wet ropes across her face, and every few feet she'd stop, press her forehead to the ground, and breathe in a way I could hear from 30 feet off, a wet, ragged, tearing kind of breath, the sound a bellows makes when the leather's split. Then she'd lift her head, fix her eyes on the cottonwood ahead of her, and start again. Hand, knee, drag. I have counted a great many things in my 60 years. I never counted on her. "Ma'am," I said. I don't know why I said ma'am. Force of an old habit that had no business surviving out here. But she froze at the sound of my voice the way a jackrabbit freezes, that total stone stillness that isn't calm at all but the opposite, the stillness of an animal doing arithmetic on whether it can outrun the thing that's found it. And she couldn't outrun anything. We both knew that. I could see it settle over her shoulders, the knowing. She turned her head, and I got my first proper look at her face, and I forgot about the water level and the coffee and every number I'd ever tallied in my life. She was young, younger than I'd guessed, maybe 20, maybe not even, Apache. I'd lived alongside the Chiricahua country long enough to know the difference in a face, though I'll be honest and tell you that in those years most white men out here didn't bother to learn differences. To them it was all one people, and that one people was the enemy. Her cheek was split open and crusted black. One eye had swelled near shut. But it was the other eye that stopped me, the good one, the open one, because there was nothing in it. No fear, no plea, no hope. Just a flat, exhausted waiting. The look of somebody who has already had the worst thing happen and is only lying here to find out what the second worst thing will be. I have seen that look since, in myself, in a shaving mirror, but I hadn't yet that morning. That morning it was new to me, and it went through me like cold water. "You're hurt," I said, stupid. A stupid thing to say to a woman crawling through mud with her face caved in. She said nothing. Her hand closed around a rock the size of a hen's egg, slow, deliberate. Not a threat exactly. A woman that far gone hasn't got a threat left in her, but a statement. "If you come down here, I will make you pay something for it." Even flat on her belly in the clay, with one leg that wouldn't hold her, she was gathering what little she had left to charge a price. I want you to understand that this is the thing I remember most about her, from that first hour and every hour after. Not the crawling, the rock. The way at the very bottom of everything, when hope was gone and strength was gone, and even the ability to stand was gone, she still reached for a stone. Some people, when the world empties them out, go soft and quiet and let it take them. And some people pick up a rock. I have spent a long while now trying to decide which kind I am, and I think the honest answer is that I didn't know until I met somebody who was the second kind and wanted to be near it. I set my coffee down on a flat stone. I raised both hands, palms out, the way you gentle a spooked horse. I'm not going to touch you, I said. I'm going to walk back up to that house. There's a fire. There's food and water and a bed that nobody's used since my wife passed. If you want it, you come. If you don't, you don't. I'll leave the door open either way. She watched me. The rock did not leave her hand. My name's Elias Voss, I said, because it felt wrong to walk off without giving her that much. This is my land, such as it is. And then I did the hardest thing I did that whole day, which was turn my back on her and walk away. Every instinct I had wanted to go down that bank and gather her up like a hurt calf and carry her to safety. And I knew that if I did, she'd open my cheek with that rock, and she'd be right too. A woman who's been handled the way I could see she'd been handled does not get carried anywhere by a strange man ever again. If she was going to come into my house, she was going to come in on her own too, on her own 1.5, under her own power, or not at all. It was the only dignity I had to offer, and it near killed me to offer it, because it meant walking uphill listening to that split bellows breath behind me, and not knowing if she'd bleed out in the mud before she made up her mind. I made the coffee. I stoked the fire. I set out bread and cold beans and a pitcher of water and a clean cloth, and I sat down at the table with my ledger, and I did not look at the door, because looking would have felt like watching for her, and watching for her would have been a kind of pressure, and I'd already decided she'd had enough pressure put on her for one lifetime. I opened the ledger to a fresh page. At the top I wrote the date. Under it, out of habit, I started to make a list of the day's tasks, and I got as far as mend the north fence before my hand stopped, and I sat there with the pencil hanging over the page, listening. The breathing had stopped. I didn't move. I couldn't tell if it had stopped because she was resting, or because she was gone, or because she'd finally gotten to her feet, and the not knowing was a hand around my throat. I have faced down a bank man about to foreclose, and a bull that wanted me dead, and a fever that took my Sarah in 4 days, and I don't know that any of it made my heart slam the way it slammed in the quiet of that kitchen, waiting to hear a sound that would tell me a stranger was still alive. Then a scrape, the drag of something across the threshold. I did not look up. I kept my eyes on the ledger, on the words mend the north fence, and I said, in the most ordinary voice I could dredge up, beans are cold but there's bread. Water's fresh. Take what you want. Silence, a long one. Then a sound I'll carry to my own grave, the small animal sound of a starving person trying not to make a sound while they eat. She'd gotten to the bread. She was tearing at it, and she was trying to do it quiet, trying not to let me hear how badly she needed it, and the trying was worse than if she'd fallen on it howling. Pride in the middle of desperation. Pride when pride had earned her nothing but grief. I kept my head down and I wrote mend the north fence 3 more times in a column, one under the other, so that my hands would have something to do that wasn't reaching for her, and my eyes stung, and I told myself it was the wood smoke. That was how she came to my house, not carried, crawling and then eating stolen feeling bread in the corner farthest from me, with her back to the wall and a rock still in her fist. Her name, I would learn, was Nita, though it took her 4 days to give it to me, and when she did she said it like she was handing over the last coin in her pocket. I want to be careful here, telling this, because a man my age telling a story about a young Apache woman he took into his house, I know how that sounds. I know what the town made of it, and I'll get to the town because the town is the whole trouble of this story. But I need you to know that for the first many weeks, I was to Nita what a fence post is to a horse tied to it. A fixed thing. A thing that doesn't move toward you. I fed her and I doctored what I could of her. The split cheek I couldn't do much for but keep clean, and it healed to a thin white line she'd carry always, and mostly I left her be. I gave her the bedroom. I slept in the barn, on account of I could see that a locked door between us let her sleep, and her sleeping mattered more to me than my own back, which complained about it plenty. The leg was the thing. The leg had been broken, and broken bad, and set by nobody, or set by somebody who wanted it to knit wrong. I am no doctor, but I've set the legs of enough animals to know a bone that's healed crooked, and hers had healed crooked below the knee, so that the foot turned in and the whole leg had gone shorter than its mate. When she walked, and by the second week she was walking, gripping the wall, gripping the table, gripping anything but me, she went with a deep, lurching dip down, and it cost her. You could see it cost her. Sweat on her lip by the time she crossed the room. Jaw set like a bear trap. She would not sit and be waited on. She'd drag herself to the window and stand there looking out at the country with her hand white-knuckled on the sill, and I understood, watching her, that the limp was not the worst of her injuries. The worst of her injuries was that she had been, before all this, a person who ran. You could see it in the shape of her, in the long, lean muscle of her, in the way her good leg still wanted to spring. She had been fast. She had been free. And somebody had taken a rock or a rifle butt or a boot heel to her leg and made sure she'd never be either again. I found out how eventually, not from her. From a soldier at the fort, months later, drunk and bragging, who did not know I had any reason to want to kill him for the story he was telling. I won't set it all down. Some things a man shouldn't repeat even to make a point. It's enough to say that her band had been taken, and the taking had gone the way those things went, and she had run, because she was the fastest, because she'd always been the fastest, and a man had caught her leg with a swung rifle to stop her running. And then men had done what men did, and then they'd left her for dead because a girl who can't run is no use as anything, not even as a captive, and it was less trouble to leave her broken in the desert than to feed her. She'd crawled 11 days to reach my creek. 11. I did the arithmetic later from where the fort was, and I had to put the pencil down. But that morning at the window, I knew none of it. I knew only that she stood there looking at the open country with a hunger that had nothing to do with food, and that when a deer came down to the creek and bolted at some sound and ran, just ran, that clean four-legged flight across the flat, I saw her hand tighten on the sill until I thought the wood might crack, and I saw her face, and I had to go out to the barn so she wouldn't have to be looked at while she felt what she was feeling. I sat on a hay bale and I opened the ledger and I wrote, "She watched the deer run," and then I couldn't think of a single number to make it hold still, so I just closed the book. The town was called Redemption, which is the kind of joke the country plays on you out there. 40 buildings, 1 church, 2 saloons, a general store run by a man named Purvis who watered his whiskey and salted his flour, and a sheriff, Coyle, who wore his badge like a man wears a coat he stole, proud and nervous both. I went in every second Thursday for supplies and to sell what eggs and butter Nita and I. By then it had become Nita and I in the small economies of the place. She'd taken to the hens. She had a way with them to sell what we had. The trouble started the 3rd or 4th Thursday, when Purvis leaned over his counter and said, real friendly, "Here you got yourself a squaw out to your place, Elias." I have thought a great deal about what I should have said. I've had years to think about it. I said, "I've got a hired hand who's Apache and none of your business, Purvis," which was a lie about the hired hand and the truth about the none of his business, and it satisfied nobody, least of all me. He smiled the way a man smiles when he's already decided a thing about you. "Sure," he said, "hired hand." And he let it sit there between us on the counter, next to the salted flour, that word and the ugliness under it, and I paid for my supplies and I left, and I felt the eyes on my back the whole walk to the wagon. Here is the thing I understood driving home. The country I lived in did not have room in it for what Nita was, which was a person. It had room for a squaw, which was a thing you could talk about at a counter. It had room for a threat, which is what the Apache were to those people, a word that meant fire on the horizon and children stolen and every fear they carried. It had room for a whore, which is what they'd decide she was the minute they saw the limp, and did the low arithmetic on why a young woman would be living out at a widow's place. It had room for all of that. It did not have room for Nita, who was afraid of the dark and would not let a candle go out at night, who fed the hens by hand and named them, who could not run and grieved it like a death, who had crawled 11 days rather than lie down and quit, who kept a rock under her pillow and I let her, and never said a word about it because a person is entitled to their rock. I drove home, and I did not tell her what Purvis had said. That was my first mistake in a string of them. I thought I was protecting her. What I was doing was deciding, for her, what she could and couldn't bear, the exact thing that had been done to her by everyone else her whole life, and it would come to grief. But I didn't know that yet. I only knew I couldn't stand to put that ugliness in front of her, on top of everything, so I swallowed it. And I brought the supplies in, and she looked up from the hens with her head, tilted the particular way she had when she was reading me, and she said, "What happened in town?" Not a question. She'd learned my face by then the way I'd learned hers. "Nothing," I said. She looked at me a moment longer. Then she went back to the hens, and something in the room went cool, and I understood that I'd lied to her and she'd caught it, and that a lie between two people who have each been lied to their whole lives by everyone is a heavier thing than it would be between other folks. I'd spent it cheap. I'd find out later how dear it was. She started talking in the 5th week. Not much. A word here, a word there, and then whole sentences in an English better than she let on at first. She'd been at a mission school as a girl before her father took her back to the band, and she carried both worlds in her and belonged fully to neither, which is its own kind of limp, if you want to think of it that way. I did think of it that way. I've had cause to. She'd talk in the evenings mostly, while I mended tack at the table, and she sat by the fire with her bad legs stretched out toward the heat. She talked about her mother, about a brother, younger, who she didn't say what had become of, but I could hear the shape of it in the silence around his name. She told me she'd been able to run down a pronghorn once, over a long enough distance, not to catch it fresh, but to run it to exhaustion, the old way, on foot, over miles, till the animal's heart gave before her legs did. She told it plain, no boast in it, and I set down the tack and just listened, because I was hearing a person describe the thing that had been most theirs in all the world, the thing that had been taken. I would run, she said, looking at the fire, and there would be nothing. No man, no fort. No, she searched for the word, or maybe just for whether to say it, no yesterday, no tomorrow, only the ground and my breath and the animal and the sun going down. That is all I ever wanted to be, a thing that runs. I said, "You crawled 11 days. She looked at me sharp, because I wasn't supposed to know the number, but I'd worked it out and I couldn't take it back. "That's a kind of running," I said. "Slowest kind there is, but you didn't stop. 11 days is a long way to go on your hands toward nothing you could see. I had to stop and start again. I don't know that I could have done it. I want that on the record. Whatever you think you lost out there, you didn't lose that. That's still in you. I've watched it. It scares the hell out of me, if you want the truth." She didn't answer, but she looked at me a while in the firelight with that good eye that had been so empty the first morning and wasn't empty anymore, was full of something careful and unfinished, and then she looked back at the fire, and after a long time she said, so quiet I almost missed it, "You talk too much, old man." Which was, I understood, the kindest thing she'd said to anybody in a very long time. I went back to my tack. I was smiling like a fool. I didn't let her see. I have to tell about the night of the storm, because that's when the ground shifted under us, and I've never been able to decide all these years since, whether it was the best night of my life or the beginning of the worst stretch of it. Both, I expect. The good and the bad in that country came braided together, so tight you couldn't ever pull one loose without the other coming with it. It was late summer, and the monsoon came down like the sky had a grudge. Thunder that you felt in your teeth. The kind of lightning that turns the whole world white and then blinds you worse in the dark after. I was in the barn where I slept, and I heard the hens going mad, and I ran out into it, the water already ankle-deep and rising. The creek I'd tallied so carefully that first morning, now a brown, roaring thing tearing at its banks. The coop was going. Built too low, my fault, years of meaning to move it. And Nita was already out there. Out there in the storm, in the mud, in the dark on that leg, hauling hens two at a time toward the barn, dip and lurch and dip, going down in the muck and hauling herself back up and going again, water to her knees, lightning showing me flashes of her like a magic lantern, down, up, down, up. And I understood in a cold rush that she'd fall, that the water would take her, that she could not run and could barely walk and had no business out in a flood. And I shouted her name into the wind, and she couldn't hear me or wouldn't, and I went for her. I got to her as the coop went. It just went, lifted up on the brown water and came apart, and she lunged for the last of the hens and missed and went down into the current, and I had her wrist. I had her wrist in both my hands and my boots sliding in the muck and the whole weight of the flood trying to take her from me. And for one long, terrible second it was going to win. The water was going to win. And I looked down at her face in the lightning white and her good eye was locked on mine, and there was no flat emptiness in it now. None. There was a person fighting to live with everything she had. And I hauled. I hauled with the bad shoulder and something tore in it that never came right again, and I did not care. I have never once cared. And I got her up out of it. And we went down together in the mud above the water line and lay there in the pounding rain with the hens screaming and the sky breaking open, breathing, just breathing, her split bellows breath and mine, tangled up together in the dark. She was shaking, from the cold, from the fear, from the water still roaring by 3 feet from us. And I did a thing I hadn't done in all those weeks, that I'd sworn to myself I'd never do, that fence-post promise. I put my arm around her. To warm her. Only to warm her and to tell my own hammering heart that she was here. She hadn't gone into the flood, she was here. And she went stiff as a fence rail under my arm, every muscle locking, and I felt my own stomach drop because I'd broken it. I'd broken the one thing I'd built, the one safe thing. And then she didn't pull away. She stayed, shaking, rigid, terrified, and she stayed in the curve of my arm in the rain, and I felt the exact moment the stiffness in her began to let go degree by degree, the way ice lets go of a pump handle when you finally get warm water to it. Slow, distrustful, but letting go. And I bent my head down close to her ear, so the storm wouldn't steal it, and I said the thing I'd been carrying and hadn't known I was carrying, the thing that 4 words could barely hold. I said it low, and I meant it in the only way I've ever meant anything, which is the way that has nothing to do with what Purvis and his kind would make of it, and everything to do with a person who had been thrown away by the whole world finding out she wasn't going to be thrown away by me. You belong with me. The rain came down. She didn't answer. I felt her breath hitch once hard against my chest, and I did not look to see if it was a sob, because some things you leave a person the privacy of, even when they're in your arms. And the creek roared, and somewhere in the dark a hen we'd saved was still alive and complaining about it, and I thought, there. Now it's said. Now there's no taking it back, and God help us both, because the town will make it mean the ugliest thing it can, and I've just handed them the rope. I was right about that. I was righter than I knew. But that was tomorrow's trouble. That night there was only the 2 of us in the mud and the storm passing over, and a woman who could not run, choosing, for the first time in a long and brutal life, to hold still on purpose. Not caught. Not trapped. Held. She said something then into my chest, so quiet the rain nearly took it whole. I only caught the last of it. Don't know how, she said. I didn't ask her how to what. I already knew, and I didn't have the answer either. The word for what we were did not exist, so the town made one up, and the word they made up was shame. They didn't say it to my face at first. It came sideways, the way poison always comes in a small place. Through the price Purvis charged me for nails, which had gone up by 1/3 since summer. Through the way the pew around me at the church emptied, folks finding sudden reasons to sit elsewhere, until I sat alone in a bench built for a family and felt the cold of all that empty wood. Through the boys who threw a dead rattlesnake into my wagon bed one Thursday and ran off whooping, and I found it when I got home, coiled and stiff, and I buried it before Nita could see. Because a woman keeps a rock under her pillow does not need to know the neighbors are sending her dead snakes. There I go again, deciding what she could bear. I'd learn. I want to set down honestly how it worked, the turning of a town, because I've heard people talk since like a place goes bad all at once, a lightning strike of meanness. It isn't like that. It's slow and it's made of small permissions. One man decides it's all right to charge me extra and nobody stops him. So the next man decides it's all right to shoulder me off the boardwalk, and nobody stops him either. And every small cruelty that goes unpunished is a door held open for a larger one. I watched it happen to me over the fall of that year, one held open door at a time, and I understood that they weren't building toward hating me. They already hated her. That was old, that was in the soil, that was a hate they'd been handed by their fathers. What they were building toward was permission to do something about it, and a town, given long enough, always finds its permission. I kept my head down. I told myself if I gave them nothing to push against, the thing would starve. That was my second mistake, and it grew straight out of my first. I was still lying. Lying to the town by pretending nothing had changed. Lying to myself by pretending the lie was strategy and not fear. And lying, worst of all, still lying to Nita, who by now knew the price of nails as well as I did. She kept the household tallies. She was better with a figure than I was, it turned out, quick and exact, and who watched the numbers climb and said nothing, and drew her own conclusions in the silence I kept leaving her to fill. The night it broke open between us, it was over a candle. She would not sleep in the dark. I've said that. She kept a candle by the bed, and I never begrudged her the tallow, though tallow was one more thing gone dear at Purvis's. But that night I came in from the barn to bank the fire, and I saw her candle had burned to nothing and gone out, and I heard her in the dark of the bedroom, awake, breathing that fast, shallow way, and I did a foolish, kind thing. I lit a fresh candle, and I opened her door a crack to set it inside where she could reach it. I forgot the rule. My own rule, the fence-post rule. You do not come at Nita in the dark. She came off that bed like something uncoiling, and she had the rock in her fist, and she was across the room before I'd got the candle set down, and she checked herself. She checked herself at the last when the light caught my face, but her arm was already swung, and the rock came down and caught me across the brow, glancing, not the full weight, but enough. Enough to open the skin and put me on the floor with the world ringing. I sat there, blood coming down into my eye, warm, the candle guttering where I dropped it, and Nita standing over me with the rock still up, chest heaving, her face a thing I'd never seen on it, pure animal terror, the fort terror, the terror of a body that had been trained by men to expect the worst thing from a door opening in the dark. She wasn't seeing me, she was seeing them. I did not move. I did not reach for her or reach to defend myself. I sat in my own blood on the floorboards, and I made my voice as flat and slow and level as the ground, and I said, "It's Elia's. You're in your house. Nobody's coming through that door but me, and I won't do it again." The rock stayed up a long moment. Then it came down, not on me, to her side, hanging from her hand, and the terror went out of her face and left something worse behind it, which was understanding. She understood what she'd done. She understood who she'd done it to. And I watched the whole cost of it land on her at once, and she said, "Your face," in a small broken voice, and I said, "It's nothing. I've done worse to myself shaving," which was a lie, a small one, a kind one, but a lie. And she heard it as a lie, because by now she heard all my lies, and something in her face closed like a door. "You lied to me," she said, quiet, not the rock quiet, a different quiet. "All the small things, the town, the nails, the snake in the wagon. Yes, I saw. I am not blind, old man. I see the dirt on your hands where you buried it. You think you protect me. You decide what I can carry. You decide, and you do not ask." She was crying now and furious at herself for it, wiping at her face with the back of the hand that held the rock. Every man in my life decided what I could carry. Everyone. They decided I could carry the fort. They decided I could carry the leg. And now the one man who, she stopped. She would not finish it. "You decide too. You are kinder than they were. That is all. You are the kindest man who ever decided my life for me without asking. I have been struck by that rock, and I have been struck by that sentence, and I will tell you plain. The sentence hurt worse, and it hurt worse because it was true, and it did not stop being true just because I'd meant well. That's the trap of meaning well. You can do a person real harm from inside the warm belief that you're sparing them, and the belief makes it near impossible to see, because you keep pointing at your own good intentions like they're evidence. I got up off the floor. I found the cloth and I pressed it to my brow, and I did the hardest, most necessary thing, which was to stop protecting her from the truth. You're right, I said, about all of it. Purvis calls you a squaw to my face and I don't tell you. The boys threw the snake and I buried it. The church won't sit by me. Coyle the sheriff stopped me on the road Tuesday and told me there's talk of getting up a paper, a petition, to run you off my land as a, I made myself say his word, because she'd earned the truth of it, all of it, no more deciding for her as a danger to the settlement. There's men in Redemption right now, tonight, arguing over whether they've got the right to come take you off my property. That's the town. That's what I've been carrying that I didn't let you carry, and I was wrong to. I've been keeping the numbers from you like keeping them from you would make them smaller, and it doesn't. You keep the household tallies better than I ever did. You should have had these. They're yours. It's your life. I'm sorry. The candle guttered. She stood there holding her rock, holding my truth, both of them heavy. And then she did something I did not expect. She crossed to me, slow, the dip and lurch, but toward me on purpose, and she took the cloth out of my hand and she pressed it to my brow herself, harder than I'd have dared, the way you tend a wound you mean to see healed, and she said low, "Then we do not run." "We can't run," I said. "You can't." "No." Her eye came up to mine, and the empty was gone from it, had been gone a while, and in its place was that thing I'd seen the first morning in the shape of her reaching for a stone. "You do not hear me, old man. I do not say we cannot run. I say we do not." She let that sit. "All my life I run. It is the best thing in me, and it is the only thing I am allowed to do, run or be taken. Run or be taken. Those are the two things. And they broke my leg so I could not run, and they thought that was the end of me, because to them I am only a thing that runs or a thing that is taken." Her hand pressed the cloth. "But there is a third thing. I have never been allowed the third thing. The third thing is to stand." Her voice cracked and she pushed through it. "I cannot run from these men. Good. Then I will not. I will stand on this bad leg on your bad land, and I will make them come and take me off it in front of God, and let them see what they are, doing it. Let them look at it in the daylight. I am tired of running, Elias, even before the leg. I was so tired of running." I looked at her a long while. "That'll likely get us both killed," I said. "Yes," she said, and almost she smiled. "Now you do not lie to me. Now we are even. I've turned that night over more times than I've turned any other, and here is what I've come to. The rock across my brow and the choosing to stand happened inside the same hour, from the same person, and they were not opposite things. They were the same thing. The instinct that swung the rock and the instinct that refused to run were the same root instinct. I will not be taken without a cost. All that had ever changed, from the wash that first morning to my bedroom floor that night, was who the cost was for. She'd learned, somewhere in those months of hens and firelight, and a man who slept in a barn to let her sleep sound, that she had something worth standing for that wasn't only her own body. That's a dangerous thing to teach a person the world has decided to throw away. It gives them a reason to stop crawling toward nothing and start standing toward something. And standing gets you killed a lot faster than crawling does. I wrote in the ledger that night, after she'd finally slept, one line, blood still tacky on my brow. She says the third thing is to stand. And under it, out of an old habit that had lost all its comfort, I tried to make a list, tasks. But there was only the one task now, and no number would hold it still, so I wrote it plain, the way she'd taught me to stop lying. Do not let them take her. I didn't know how. I want that in the record too, same as the rest. A man in this story is supposed to have a plan at this point, a clever thing, a stand at the door with a rifle and a speech. I had a torn shoulder that wouldn't lift a rifle right anymore, a banknote past due and one friend in the county, and I wasn't even sure he was a friend, so much as a man who owed me and hated owing. I had less than nothing. I had a crooked-legged woman and a played-out ranch, and a town full of men gathering their permission. What I had, it turned out, that they didn't reckon on was that Nita kept the tallies. The one man who owed me was named Absalom Reyes. He ran cattle south of me, a big spread, and years back before Sarah passed, before any of this, I'd pulled 200 head of his out of a box canyon in a blizzard when his own men had given them up for lost, and he'd never forgiven me for it, the way a proud man can't forgive a debt he can't repay in kind. He was half Mexican and half something he never said, and redemption looked down its nose at him too, though his money was good enough that they took it, which is the town's whole character in one sentence. I rode down to him 3 days after the night of the rock, my brow scabbed, and I laid it out plain, the petition, the talk, the men, and I asked him for nothing but the truth of what he'd do. He heard me out on his porch. He was quiet a while, then he said, "You want to know, will I stand at your door with a gun?" "No," I said. "I want to know, will you not stand against it? That's all I've got the right to ask. Whatever you owe me, that squares it. You keep clear of it. That's what I came to say." He looked at me like I'd surprised him, which I had. "Most men would ask for the gun," he said. "Most men would be right to. I'm not asking. Your neck's your own. You've got people. I'm not going to be the reason they lose you." I turned to go. "And I'll tell you why I did it that way, why I gave him the out. Because I was so full up to the throat of men deciding other men's lives for them, of Coyle and Purvis and the whole permission machine, that I couldn't stomach doing the same to Absalom, laying my trouble on his neck because he owed me. A debt is not a leash. I decided that somewhere on the ride down, and it cost me the only ally I might have had, and I did it anyway, and I've never once been sorry." I was almost to my horse when he said, "The petition." I stopped. "They need it signed," he said, "to make it law-looking. Coyle won't move without it looking like law. He hasn't the belly to just ride out and do it. He needs the paper so that later, when someone asks, he can say the town wanted it, not him. That is how his kind works. They do not do the thing. They arrange to have the thing done and keep their own hands clean." Absalom was quiet a moment. "Who is watering Purvis's whiskey, Elias? Who salts his flour and shorts his weights? You have lived here 20 years. Half that town owes Purvis money and hates him for it. And Coyle took a bribe from the railroad 2 years back to swear a right-of-way ran through the Hollies' place when it did not. And old Hollies lost the land. And there are men in redemption who know it and have never said, because who would they say it to? The sheriff." I stood by my horse in the failing light, and I began, slowly, to understand. "You are trying to win a fight of hate with a good heart," Absalom said. "You will lose. A good heart is a fine thing and it will get you buried. But a town like Redemption is not held together by hate, my friend. Hate is only the paint. Underneath it is debt and fear and shame that men are keeping for each other. Every man in that town is holding some other man's dirty secret and holding his own and terrified of the day the tally comes due." He leaned forward. "You do not need a gun. You need a ledger." I rode home in the dark with my heart going strange, and I thought about Nita bent over the household figures, quick and exact, catching Purvis's shorted weights months before I'd have noticed, keeping the tallies I'd been too proud or too scared to keep straight myself. "You keep the numbers better than I do." I'd said it to her as a kindness. I hadn't known it was a weapon. I'll tell how we did it, though I'll tell it short, because the how matters less than what it cost her, and it cost her something, and that's the part of this I most need to get right. We did not fight the petition. We fought the men who'd sign it, one at a time in the dark with numbers. Nita, it emerged, had a mind like a steel trap for a figure once she'd seen it, and she'd been watching Redemption's small economies for months from behind my shoulder on those Thursdays, quiet, invisible, because a squaw is invisible. That was the town's own weakness. They'd made her furniture and never dreamed the furniture was keeping accounts. She knew who Purvis shorted and by how much, because she'd been shorted alongside them and tallied it. She knew, from the church women's gossip that flowed right past her like she wasn't there, whose farm was behind on its note, and whose son had got a girl in trouble 2 counties over, and whose husband drank the seed money. She'd absorbed the whole hidden ledger of that town through the pores of her silence, and none of them had ever once imagined she was a person who could hold it. We didn't threaten anyone. I want that clear. We never once said do this or we tell. What we did, what she did mostly, it was her plan. I was the legs and the horse and the white face that could ride into a yard without getting shot. Was ride out to a man quiet and tell him plain that Purvis had been shorting his weights. Here's the tally, here's the proof. And Purvis is the one getting up the petition to keep the town looking his way and away from his scales. Which was true. Purvis was driving it. I'd been too close to see it, because a town busy hating the Apache woman was a town not counting its own flour. Fear is a coin, Absalom had said, and Purvis had been spending hours to buy his own cover. One man at a time, we handed them back their own numbers. And one man at a time, they did the arithmetic Absalom had promised they'd do. That their real enemy wasn't the crippled woman out at Voss's place who'd never taken a cent from them, but the fat man behind the counter who'd been taking cents from them for 20 years while pointing at her. The petition died, not from love, not from any man of redemption looking into his heart and finding it better than he'd left it. It died from arithmetic. It died because Nita had kept the tallies nobody thought she could keep, and the tallies were worth more than any gun I could have held with my ruined shoulder. And here is the cost, the thing I have to set down honestly. It didn't make them love her. It didn't even make them stop hating her. It only made them afraid of her, which is a different thing and a colder one, and Nita knew the difference better than I did. She'd been feared before, her whole people had been feared, and she knew exactly what feared bought you and what it didn't. It bought you left alone. It did not buy you belonging. The night the petition folded and Coyle rode out to tell me, sour, that the matter's been dropped, I came inside near giddy with the relief of it, and I found her at the window in the dark, the candle unlit for once, looking out at the country. We won, I said. You won, she said, and then so quiet. They will not come now, I know. I made them not come. I made them afraid. She turned from the window, and her face in the starlight was tired in a way that went past the body. I did the only thing I know how to do, old man. I could not run, so I did the other thing my people do. I made them afraid of what I know, a long breath. It works, it always works. And every time it works, they hate you a little more, and they teach it to their sons, and the sons grow up and break some other girl's leg. She looked at me. This is not the third thing, Elias. This is not standing. I thought I was standing, but I only ran again. I ran with numbers instead of legs. That is all. I didn't have an answer. I've never come up with one in all the years, and I've had years. I said the only thing I had, which was, you're still here. You didn't get taken. That has to count. It counts, she agreed softly. It is only not what I wanted it to count for. And she came and stood by me at the cold hearth, close, the way she'd let herself begin to do since the flood, her shoulder near my arm, and neither of us lit the candle, and we stood in the dark she was so afraid of on purpose together. And I understood that this standing, the two of us in the dark not running, was closer to her third thing than the whole clever bloodless victory had been. Bye, she said. No, she didn't say bye. I'm getting old and mixing my tongues, forgive me. She said my name, Elias, when you said it, in the storm, the thing you said. She didn't look at me. Did you mean belong like a man means a wife, or did you mean it the other way, the way I keep the rock? A thing that is yours so no one else can throw it away. And there it was, the question under all of it, the one I'd been not answering to myself for months, the way I'd not told her about the nails and the snake, deciding again, always deciding, that some truths were too heavy to set down between us. I opened my mouth to give her the easy answer, the kind one, the safe fence-post answer. I'd promised her no more lies. So I told her the truth, and the truth was more complicated than either thing she'd offered me, and it did not fit into 4 words in a storm, and I stood in the dark and I tried to find the shape of it, and out past the window a coyote called once and went quiet, and the whole broken country held still to listen, and I don't have a clean answer, I said. I've been trying to give you clean things this whole time, clean answers, clean protection, a clean win. And every clean thing I've handed you turned out to have a rot in it you saw before I did. So I'll give you the true one, and it's not clean, and you can do with it what you want. The coyote didn't call again. The country waited. When I said it in the storm, I didn't know what I meant. That's the truth. I felt you shaking, and I felt how close the water came to taking you, and something in me just said it, before I'd thought it. And I've had all the weeks since to think it, and here's where I've got to. I made myself look at her in the starlight and not at the safe, dark floor. I don't want you the way a man wants a wife. Maybe once I might have in some other life where you were some other woman and I was 30 and whole, but that's not this. You're not a thing I want to have. I've watched what it does to you when a person tries to have you, and I'd cut my hand off before I'd add to it. I stopped, started again, slower. And I don't mean it the rock way either, a thing that's mine so nobody else can throw it out, because that still makes you a thing, a prized thing, a kept thing, and you didn't crawl 11 days to be kept. Then what, she said, barely a sound. I meant, and I had to reach for it, it was a hard shape to hold. I meant you don't have to earn the ground under you anymore. That's what I meant. Everybody in your whole life, you had to earn your place, earn it by running fast, by being useful, by being feared, by keeping the tallies, by being worth the trouble of. And I'm telling you, there's one patch of the earth, this played-out worthless patch right here, where you don't have to be worth anything to anybody, where you get to just be on it, bad leg and all, rock under your pillow and all. That's what belong meant. Not that you belong to me, that you belong here and nobody gets to put that up for a vote. Not the town, not Coyle, not me. I ran out of breath and words at the same time. That's the true answer. It's not a wife and it's not a rock. I don't have a word for it. I'm sorry, there's no word for it. She was quiet a long time. Long enough that I thought I'd got it wrong, said too much, the old talking too much she'd teased me for. Then she said, there is a word for it. And she didn't tell me what it was. She said it in her own tongue, one soft word I didn't know and never learned the meaning of, and she didn't translate it, and I understood I wasn't meant to. Some things a person keeps. Some things aren't for you to hold, only to have been near. She lit the candle then. First time in months she'd lit it while I was in the room in front of me, letting me watch her be afraid of the dark and choose the light anyway. Small thing. I've built a life on how large a small thing can be. We had 2 good years. I set that down flat because I don't trust myself to say it gentle without it turning to sugar, and she'd have hated sugar. 2 years. That's the whole of the good part of this story, and I'll give it to you honestly, which means I'll give you the ordinary of it, because the ordinary is what I'd trade the rest of my life to have back. She never walked without the limp. It never stopped costing her, but she stopped hiding it, somewhere in there stopped setting her jaw and sweating to cross a room like the limp was ashamed to be muscled through, and started just moving how she moved, dip and lurch, unhurried like a person who'd made peace with the shape of her own going. That was its own kind of standing, I think. The third thing found in the smallest place, not defiance. Just not apologizing for the leg anymore. Not to me, not to the hens, not to the country. She never did learn to run again, of course. But I'll tell you what she did the second spring, and it's the thing I think of when I think of her, more than the crawl, more than the flood, more than the rock. There was a girl among Absalom's people, a niece, orphan, 10 or 11, quick as water, and Nita took to teaching her. To run. The old way, not for sport. She'd sit on a flat rock at the edge of the flat with her bad leg stretched out, and she'd send that girl out across the ground, and she'd call to her slower, hold it back. The animal is not tired yet. Wait, wait. The sun is your friend, not the speed. coaching the child through the long, patient pursuit that her own leg would never let her run again. Passing it on. The best thing in her, the thing they'd broken in her body, she poured out through her voice into a child who could carry it forward on two good legs into a world Nita wouldn't see. I asked her once, didn't it hurt, watching the girl run when she couldn't? She thought about it. Yes, she said, and then, also no, when she runs, I run. This is a thing my body forgot and she touched her chest, did not. She watched the girl come flying back across the flat, laughing, alive, fast. They thought they broke the running, they only broke the legs. The running went somewhere they cannot reach it. She looked at me sidelong with the old dry thing in her eye. You would write this in your book. She says the running went somewhere, and then you would try to make it a number. I would not, I said, which was a lie because that night I did exactly that and she knew I would, and that was the joke and we both got to have it. I have been putting off the rest of it. I've written this far in an afternoon and it's dark now and my hand's tired and I've been putting off the rest of it the way I put off telling her about the nails, the way I put off telling her about the snake, thinking, still after everything, that if I don't set it down it'll be a smaller thing. It won't. She taught me it won't. So. It wasn't the town that took her. I need that known because for 2 years I braced against the town, watched the town, kept my ledger of the town's small permissions, and the town, in the end, had nothing to do with it. The country doesn't care what you brace against. It has its own arithmetic and it doesn't consult yours. It was the fever. The same fever that took my Sarah or its cousin. It came through the county in the third autumn, moving farm to farm, and it took the very old and the very young, and it took people whose bodies had already spent too much of themselves surviving other things. Nita's body had spent a great deal. 11 days of crawling. A leg that cost her with every step for years. A winter in the fort I never let her tell me the whole of. She'd paid out so much of her strength staying alive that, when the fever came asking for more, there wasn't the reserve in her that there might have been in a woman who'd had an easier road. I nursed her the way I'd nursed Sarah, which is to say helplessly, which is to say with cold cloths and broth she couldn't keep down and every prayer I'd stopped believing in, dusted off and tried again. Absalom sent the girl's mother, who knew the plants, and the plants did what plants do against a thing like that, which is not enough. And Nita fought it the way she fought everything, which is to say she did not go soft and quiet and let it take her. She fought. Even at the end, burning up, half out of her head, she fought, and I sat by the bed and held her hand and did not decide this time what she could bear. I told her the truth. When she asked me was she dying, I said yes. Because she'd made me swear off the kind lie years back, and I wasn't going to break the oath at the one moment it mattered most, the moment I most wanted to. Good, she said, not good that she was dying, good that I'd told her true. She still knew the difference even then. She always knew. She asked for the candle, I lit it. It was daylight, didn't matter. I lit it and set it where she could see it, the way I'd tried to that night years back and got a rock across the brow for it. And this time she watched the little flame with what was left of her eyes, and she said something in her own tongue, that soft word again, the one she'd never translated. The word for the thing that wasn't wife and wasn't rock. The word for belonging to a place and not a person. And I still don't know if she was saying it to me or to the flame or to the country or to the girl who could run. I'll never know. I've decided not to mind not knowing. That's hers. She's allowed to take one thing out of the world with her that I don't get to keep. She went in the night. The candle was still burning. I hadn't let it go out. Here's the part I most need to get right. And it's the part I understand least, so bare with an old man. I buried her on the flat at the edge where she used to sit and coach the girl to run. I didn't bury the rock with her. I thought about it a long while, the rock she'd kept under her pillow all those years, the rock that told the whole story of her by itself. A person who, at the very bottom, still reaches for a stone. I thought about laying it in the ground with her. And then I understood that would be exactly wrong, would be me deciding one last time what she'd want, and that the rock was never about the ground. It was about the hand, about reaching, so I kept it. It's on my table now by the ledger, and I hold it sometimes in the evenings, and I understand her a little better every year for the weight of it. The town, I'll finish with the town because you'll want to know, and because it's the ironic part, and life is full of ironies too bitter to be shaped by any writer. They can only be reported. When she died, the town of redemption was kind to me. They were. That's the thing I can't get my mind around even now. Purvis, who called her a squaw across his counter, who watered the whiskey and drove the petition, Purvis sent a ham. The church women who'd emptied the pew around me came out to the flat with food and sat with me and spoke of Nita as your Nita, poor Nita, gentle, like she'd been theirs to grieve, like they hadn't spent years teaching their sons to hate her. Coyle tipped his hat to me on the road and said she'd been a good worker, and meant it as the highest thing he had, and it was from him, and it was nothing, and both of those were true. I couldn't make sense of it. I raged at it privately in the ledger for weeks. And then Absalom, who came and sat with me the longest of anyone, who'd loved her in his own bristling way, he explained it, and I've never decided if the explanation made it better or worse. They can love her now, he said, because now she is safe to love, now she is dead. A dead Apache woman who kept your accounts and taught a child to run, this they can hold in their hearts. She asks nothing of them dead. She takes no land, no water, no place at the counter. Alive, she was a question they did not want to answer. Is this a person, and if she is, what does that make us? Dead, the question is closed. They can grieve the answer they never had to give. He was quiet. You will hate them for it. Do not waste the years. They are not strong enough to be otherwise, most of them. Strength like hers, like yours, it is rare, and it is not distributed by God with any fairness at all. They loved her the only way they were able. Too late and too safe, and it is still more than they gave her living, and it is a real thing, and it is worthless, and all of that is true at once. That is people, my friend. You have lived 70 years. You know it is people. I did know it. I know it better every year. I'm near done. My hand's tired and the candle. I keep a candle lit in the evenings now. I picked up the habit from her and never put it down. The candle's low. The girl runs. Nita's girl, Absalom's niece, she's grown now, and she runs, and last summer she ran down a pronghorn over the long distance, the old way, on foot, over miles, till the animal's heart gave before her legs did, the thing Nita described to me by the fire that first winter as the only thing she ever wanted to be. The girl did it. And she came to my flat after, breathless and shining, and she stood at the edge where Nita's buried, and she didn't say anything, just stood there heaving for breath, and I understood I was watching Nita run. The running went somewhere they couldn't reach it. She told me that. I wrote it in the book and tried to make it a number and couldn't, and now I don't try. Some things won't hold still and aren't meant to. I'll tell you the last true thing, and then I'll stop. I said that night in the storm, you belong with me, 4 words. I've spent the rest of my life finding out what they cost and what they meant, and I got most of it wrong along the way. Thought belonging meant protecting, thought it meant deciding, thought it meant keeping. It didn't mean any of that. What it meant, I think, the thing I stumbled onto without knowing and only understood after she was gone, is that to belong with someone is to be the one patch of ground where they don't have to run, and don't have to be taken, and don't have to earn it and get to do the third thing. Stand. Just stand and be on the earth, bad leg and rock and fever and all, unvoted on. I was her patch of ground for a while. It's the only thing I ever did that I'm sure was worth doing. She was mine too, though I didn't have the sense to know I needed one. A man thinks he's the fence post, the fixed thing, the ground the other person stands on. I was so busy being her ground I never noticed I'd been crawling my whole own life toward something I couldn't see, ever since Sarah, and that a woman I pulled out of a wash one gray morning had reached down and... The candle's guttering. I want to write one more thing, the thing she said in her own tongue, the word, so it's in the book at least, even if I don't know what it